just to recap, man, this is for just kids in the upstate who know you, know Juwan, know Trey Young, know all the athletes you train. But for them, I'm trying to get them to train themselves, man. The whole goal is for them to actually do the work and not have to see me every single day, but learn how to
Right.
train themselves. That makes sense, you know?
Yep.
So for you, is there anything in particular, any story that you've had to tell Juwan or Trey, one of those guys, to emphasize how they should work by themselves?
Yeah, man. With that, for me personally, I don't work with any player physically in the gym more than 2 to 3 times a week. Unless it's a specific player where we working on something during a specific time of year, whether it's in season or out of season. But ultimately, man, for any player, it's about accountability. Like, if you have to rely on a coach or a trainer or a parent for you to get better, then you'll never make it. I'm just a firm believer in that. And it goes back to your daily habits and building a strong foundation in your routine of what you do daily. And the application that goes behind that in terms of, applying what you learned daily and implementing that to where it's embedded in your muscle memory, to where when you do get into a game, you've already seen every scenario that you've been working on. So that's kind of my philosophy on that aspect.
Okay, so you have to break eggs to make an omelet. These kids,
Right.
The trainees, the athletes, they have to go through a time where they're not able to do the skill that they want to do or that you've showed them very clearly or very well. How do you encourage them through the time of the learning phase until they actually understand how to use the move and can use the move, or whatever the concept it is you're teaching?
Right. So it's a big deal with trial and error. Kind of another approach that I do. A lot of kids nowadays will get in the gym and work on a little bit of everything, whether it's, dribbling into a jump shot, maybe working on finishes or whatever the case is. For me, I'm dialing it down to the very core of the basics. Like, we may just work on floaters for an hour and a half, every kind of variation of floaters for 6 weeks until we get the ultimate amount of confidence in that ability in those floaters. And then we apply that in a pickup atmosphere. I think a lot of these kids, if you think that you're going to just be able to train and it translate into the game, you're just prolonging your own development. So essentially what you want to do is you want to find one thing to work on for X amount of weeks until you start getting confident in that, and then translate it in maybe your team practice, or just finding somebody at the gym that you could go against 1-on-1 or 2-on-2 or up to 5-on-5, and just get a lot of reps at that one particular thing. And then ultimately, when you go into those games, you, like I said before, you're just more confident in your abilities.
How do you yourself, as the trainer, how do you prepare for a workout with a high-level athlete or any athlete that you've put in extra time outside of the gym, watching film or whatever that may be, watching their games? What's your process like?
Mm-hmm. Man, I got a unique approach, to be honest. I don't really watch a lot of basketball on the players that I work with. And I know that sounds kind of, like, what are you talking about? But it's really about, there's got to be a synergy with that player. So for me, with a kid like Juwan, there's already a synergy between us, to where we know each other on a personal level, to where he knows how I think and I know how he thinks. And with that, having a lot of conversations outside of the game of basketball allows me to know where he's at mentally. Because if we're always just talking about basketball, there may be something that he may be dealing with off the court or whatever. These guys, especially on the elite side, everybody thinks on the outside it's all fine and dandy, but that's why you hear all the mental health epidemics going on now with athletes. There's a lot of mental that goes into it. So for me, it's about more so instilling confidence and having that trust with that player, to where if I do point something out, like, hey man, you need to be focusing on, watching that hedge defender coming off a ball screen and just look to attack them. Little basic, simple things that they're not overthinking it, but it'll make sense to them to where once they try it and have success, we're on to the next thing. And it's just that give and take kind of relationship that I think you have to have with players to find success for you both.
Okay, so knowing what you know now as whatever you want to call yourself, a coach, an NBA, a skill developer, a player developer, how would you go back to your high school days, your middle school days, to teach yourself the game of basketball?
Back in my day, I'm kind of an ancient soul. We didn't have trainers. We didn't have anything growing back. So it's more so about, it comes down to this, man. How great do you want to be? Don't talk about it. You just got to do it. And you have to be obsessed to be great at anything. I'm a firm believer in that because like I said, if you're waiting on somebody to call you to tell you what you're doing wrong or whatever, there's got to be that accountability factor to where you got to be in the gym all the time. There's really no secret to it. And that was kind of the thing for me is that I knew that I wasn't the most athletic or the best player, but I knew I could work the hardest. And that was something that I was in control of. So for me personally, I dealt with injuries. So I know that in my heart, I gave everything that I had at that time. And in the early 2000s, we didn't have the resources that kids have now. You could know every last little detail about the game of basketball, and it's all right in front of you. And so to me, if you don't play college basketball, whether it's JUCO, D1, D2, D3, that's your fault. Like, you honestly don't deserve to play college basketball if you're not utilizing your resources around you and applying that in your daily life.
That makes sense. Coach, I appreciate the responses, the answers. Is there anything else you would leave with the athletes, Greenville, Spartanburg, Anderson, wherever, that are listening to this?
Yeah, man, I would just tell all the players out there, if you're in high school, never compare yourself. Never compare yourself to other players because, just like a time zone in the U.S., L.A., it may be 9 a.m. out there. And on the East Coast, it's 12 p.m. At some point, though, everybody's got to cross through that time zone. And for the players, it's the same process. Just like Michael Jordan. I mean, he played JV as a sophomore. And I think it's hard for kids nowadays to get caught up in what everybody else is getting or what they're doing. They're playing on a better AAU team or they're getting scholarships or looks from this school. Just stay in your own lane, control what you can control, and focus on that slow grind, that day-to-day grinds where you're slowly separating yourself because all these guys, it don't matter if you're the first number one player in the country. When you go to college, none of that stuff means anything. So give yourself a chance. Focus on what you can do for yourself in terms of getting better every day. And things will always work out. 100% of the time, everything works out on how it's supposed to be. So,
Coach, I appreciate that, man. That was really insightful. I know they're going to appreciate the wisdom. Thank you, and I will put your information unless you want to shout out any Instagram handle or Facebook handle. I know you're you're indifferent on that kind of stuff, but where can we find you?
For sure. Everybody can find me. It's just on Twitter. It's TimMartin_TX, and it's the same on my Instagram as well. TimMartin_TX. So I'm an open book, man. Anybody want to ask me a question? That's what I'm here for, just as a resource. So I appreciate your time, man. It means a lot.
Yes, sir.